Welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe for more scary stories, or I will come for you. Story number 1. I regret selling rare animals on the dark web. By the Curator. Okay, so I'm not really sure where to start with this whole thing. It's been weighing really heavy on my mind lately, and I just need to get it out there. Let me give some backstory first. About 5 years ago, I found this pretty niche online marketplace on the dark web for buying and selling exotic pets and animals. Probably shouldn't say too much about how I stumbled on it, but let's just say I've always been really into the more rare and unique pet breeds. Anyway, I saw this as an opportunity to maybe start a little side gig selling some harder-to-get animal species. It started out pretty small, just reselling some different types of reptiles, amphibians, that kind of thing. But then I got into the fish game, specifically piranhas and other aggressive breed fish. There ended up being way more demand and money in that than I ever expected. These weren't your typical pet store piranhas either. I was getting my hands on some of the rarest, most intimidating predator fish from the Amazon and other parts of South America. So that became my main thing for a while, sourcing insane-looking piranhas and other killing machine fish and reselling them to anonymous buyers on this dark website. It was honestly pretty thrilling, and I made a decent side income from it. I even started captive breeding certain prized species to try and bump up my stock and profits. Most of the buyers were exactly who you'd expect. Edgy teenagers, wannabe tough guys, sketchy animal collectors. But there was this one particular buyer who stuck out. Their username was something like the Grinning Hamster or some weird shit like that. At first, their orders didn't seem that out of the ordinary. Maybe slightly larger than the average, but nothing too crazy. But then over the next year or so, the frequency and size of their piranha orders kept getting bigger and bigger. We're talking wanting to purchase like 40, 50, even 60 piranhas at a time. And not just the common red-bellied variety either. This person specifically wanted the absolute most aggressive, teeth-filled, flesh-eating species I could get my hands on. At a certain point, I was almost exclusively sourcing and selling to just this one buyer. Their relentless pursuit of these vicious killers started consuming all of my time and effort. I'd be making contacts in South America and having them shipped airmail at considerable risk and expense. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the fish didn't make it through processing and deliveries fully intact. I started getting really curious about who exactly this person was and why they needed this goddamn piranha army they were amassing. I tried striking up conversations in the chat room on the site to get a better sense of them, but they were very economical with their responses. Just giving terse logistics about their next order, sending payment in crypto, that kind of thing. Still, I managed to piece together a few clues here and there. The username seemed to be a reference to some kind of terrifying goblin creature, which was weird. They were apparently located somewhere in the Midwest United States, based on the zip code they'd give for deliveries. And they had significant resources to be able to get their hands on all these expensive, hard-to-get fish. It started becoming this weird obsession for me. Who was this piranha superfan, and what were they doing with all these efficient killers? I'd lie awake at night just spinning mental scenarios. Was it someone running a private aquarium and collector's tank for endangered species? Did they have a fishy food fetish of some sort? Were they using them in something cruel like unregulated blood sport fighting? I didn't have any real evidence to go on, just my own suspicions and an unhealthy curiosity getting the better of me. I probably should have just been happy taking their crypto and continuing to meet the demand, but something also felt really off about the whole thing. Where it really took a turn was when I got a new phone alert about 8 months ago. It was an automated screen recording that had been uploaded from an anonymous source to a private video streaming channel I belonged to. A channel that, up until this point, had basically been totally inactive and unused. At first, I thought maybe it was some spam robotically uploaded, but then I clicked on the video and was just completely stunned by what I saw. It was. Look, I don't want to go into too much detail, okay? Just trust me that it was extremely disturbing footage involving the terrible misuse and torture of some of the piranhas I had sold. My heart almost stopped when I saw the purchaser's username scroll across the screen at one point. The grinning hamster. This video had to be linked to my mystery buyer. Were they the ones who uploaded it and sending me a secret taunting message of some sort? I watched the whole thing, descending into more and more feelings of sickness, dread, you name it. When it was over, I didn't know what to do. I was shook and felt implicated in some horrific act, even though I had no idea it was coming. Part of me wondered if I should try and disconnect from this person once and for all. Another part of me felt a morbid need to find out what the actual fuck was going on. Over the next couple of weeks, I tried to go about business as usual on the dark web marketplace. Sure enough, the grinning hamster hit me up for another huge piranha order like clockwork. I engaged, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary in an attempt to keep them calm and get more information. They said something cryptic about how the latest batch would be the ones, and that the grinning mouth must be fed. That's when they attached a video link and told me to watch it if I had any other questions about why they needed such a steady stream of these fish. My stomach turned immediately, scared of what other kind of sickness I was about to be exposed to. But I couldn't not click on it, you know. It was like a car wreck I had to rubberneck and hopefully start putting some pieces together. The video was a compilation of first-person footage that looked like it was filmed on a GoPro or something. It started with the view of someone walking down the sidewalk at night on a residential street. They kept glancing over each shoulder like they were terrified of being seen or caught. The footage abruptly transitioned inside what looked like an old, dilapidated basement. There was a huge glass tank set up, taking up almost half the size of the room. The tank had to be at least 25 feet across and curved into a semicircle shape. The perspective then jumped to what I can only describe as some kind of stalking-style recorded clip. It looked like it was being filmed through a window, peering into what seemed to be a birthday or pool party in someone's backyard. There were kids and adults all gathered around with cake and presents. Without warning, there was suddenly a gloved hand reaching into the frame and pulling a cloth sack down over the unsuspecting lens. The muffled screaming and crying suggested that whoever was recording had just abducted one of the young partygoers. The footage quickly cut again to the perspective of the kidnapper's hazy basement. You could hear ragged breathing and the stomping of boots on the concrete floor. Then, a terrified person was violently thrown to the ground, the sack ripped off their head. They immediately began wailing and pleading to be let go. That's when the camera panned over and focused in toward the giant, curved glass tank I'd seen earlier. Inside, I could see hundreds and hundreds of piranhas frantically swimming back and forth. Or at least, I think they were piranhas based on their distinctive teeth and features. But they were absolutely massive, each one easily 2 or 3 feet long. The sobbing, kidnapped victim then pleaded, "Please, please, no, I'll do anything. Don't do this. I'm begging you." The eerie, muffled laughter that responded sent the biggest chill down my spine. That laughter. It was just so deeply unsettling, not at all human-sounding. The video's perspective suddenly darted back over to the person being held captive. You could see thick cables being handed off screen before they started violently wrapping the cables around the victim's wrists and ankles. They were tying this person up like a dog about to be put down. Out of nowhere, the unidentifiable kidnapper began dragging them across the floor toward the monstrous fish tank. You could hear slithering sounds as the body weight ground across the concrete. The person crying, begging, just becoming more and more hysterical and shrill as they got closer to the tank's edge. At the last possible moment, right before they were hurled into the water, the camera angle jolted back down toward the ground. I'll try not to go into too much nasty detail, but basically, the video cut out right when the poor soul was about to get tossed into that giant piranha tank. You could hear them screaming their head off, pleading one last time. Then there was a huge splash, and yeah, you can kind of figure out the rest. I don't know why, but I kept watching for a few more minutes. Maybe I was hoping it was just some sick joke or special effects or something. But nope, you could clearly see the water getting churned up and turning red. Chunks started floating around too. I'm not gonna lie, I hurled a little in my mouth just thinking about someone getting torn apart like that. After, like 5 minutes, the video abruptly ended. No grand finale, no killer reveal, nothing. Just that. I sat there for a while, trying to process what the fuck I had just seen. Part of me couldn't believe it was real. Like certainly no one would actually do something that deranged and messed up. But then I remembered, this was someone I had been dealing with on the dark web and enabling their piranha purchases for over a year now. Clearly, this sicko wasn't all there mentally. Who knows what other twisted shit they were into or capable of. I'll admit, I spent the next few days in a bit of a paranoid spiral, wondering if this person knew who I really was, or was gonna come after me next for being an accomplice or something. I considered just ditching the whole exotic fish game and taking my crypto earnings to live off the grid somewhere remote. But then, like clockwork, another message came through from the grinning hamster. New order. Need 75 Cerasalmus elongatus. Adolescent size. Render for pickup in 2 weeks. Attached was yet another creepy video file. At this point, I didn't even want to watch it. I was too far down this disturbing rabbit hole. But I guess some sick part of me had to know more. Had to try and figure out an endgame here. The video was even more unsettling than the last one. No creepy voiceover or peephole filmings this time, though. It just started out with that same grimy basement and abduction vantage point. A couple people were down there, casually playing some sort of card game at a table. You could obviously tell it was being filmed without them knowing. Then out of nowhere, one of those people was smashed over the back of the head with something blunt and heavy. They crumpled to the floor unconscious while their friend started screaming. That's when the shooter panned over, and you could see the silhouette of some hulking giant lurking in the shadows. The attacker was wearing this sickly pale mask that looked like a demented, screaming goblin face. Stringy hair hung off the side and everything. It let out this gnarling roar before tackling and overpowering the other person at the table. From there, it was a similar routine to the first video. Tying them up, dragging them toward the fish tank. You could hear the piranhas splashing like crazy when they got close, seemingly aware that fresh food was about to be served. This time, though, the camera angle stayed tight on the action. The masked monster hoisted their captive over their head with surprising strength. With one guttural growl, they hurled the person directly into the center of the tank like a circus act. The screams were, I can't even describe it. Just those nature videos where a baby antelope gets taken down by a pack of crocs or hyenas. It was that kind of sickening sound, times a million, like nothing I've ever heard before. But the real mindfuck came once the water settled a bit. You could see there was still one person barely treading water amongst the wreckage and feeding frenzy. Somehow kept avoiding getting pulled under by the piranhas. Just watching them beg for their life in that situation was soul-crushing. Again, no context or explanation as to who these victims were. No details on the identity of the monstrous killer either. Just a dark, cold reenactment of some kind of ritual to satiate their bloodlust. I stopped watching after that and finally mustered the courage to cut off communication with this guy completely. Blocked every channel, burned that dark web identity, all of it. There was no way I could keep dealing with them, no matter how much crypto they were offering. For a while, things were almost back to normal, and I tried putting it all behind me. But then a few months ago, I went to a hardcore show downtown and noticed this cloaked weirdo hanging around outside. Every time I made eye contact, they were just grinning at me with this disturbingly wide smile. On their way out, they bumped directly into me and quickly slipped something into my jacket. I didn't notice until I got home and felt the weird lump. Reaching in, I pulled out this tattered notepad with scribbles all over it. Most of it seemed like crazy ramblings, to be honest. Just a bunch of misspelled words and disturbing little doodles. But one of the pages definitely caught my eye. It was an address, followed by some dates and times, like a schedule or log of some sort. Based on the area code, it was listing out a location not too far from my place, maybe 20 minutes away tops. Probably just a random abandoned house or building, but still, it was pretty ominous. Part of me wanted to just chuck the notebook into the dumpster and be done with this whole nightmare for good. But that same sick curiosity kept gnawing at me, like maybe this was a clue to finally get to the bottom of this grinning hamster mystery once and for all. So, yeah, I decided to do a little recon mission. Spent a few days low-key staking out the address from the notebook, trying to get a feel for any suspicious activity. At first, it seemed like your basic rundown, boarded-up joint that squatters or junkies probably crashed at from time to time. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But then I started noticing a pattern. Like twice a week, roughly around 3 a.m., a beat-up old work van would pull up for a few hours before taking off again. At one point, I was able to get close enough to hear the faint sound of power tools and construction coming from inside the place during one of those late-night intervals. Obviously, I'm not about to go knocking on the door of some potential serial killer's hideout, but something was definitely setting off alarms in my head about this spot and the connection to the whole piranha obsession. I started getting reckless with my stakeouts, not being as careful to keep a safe distance. Like I just was weirdly possessed with figuring out what the hell was really going on. That's when things took a turn for the terrifying. I was posted up around the backside of this place in my car around 2 a.m., waiting to see if the construction van would show up like usual. Out of nowhere, this hulking masked figure came barging around the corner. The grinning maw on its face looked like something straight out of a horror movie prop basement. At first, I thought maybe it was just a random tweaker who lived in the squat. But then, it stopped dead in its tracks, seeming to stare directly at my car. That's when I heard the gurgling roar that immediately took me back to those disturbing videos. Oh, shit. This was him, the grinning hamster. He started lumbering toward me at a startling pace, each thunderous step shaking the ground. I threw my car into reverse and gunned it, tires screeching as I swerved out of that alley like a bat out of hell. I could see the masked figure just cackling and waving its arms in the rear view as I hauled ass out of there. After that, I decided any further investigation was just too risky. Not worth winding up as fish food or whatever other bod horrors this psycho had cooked up. Tried my best to scrub any involvement from the situation and started installing new security systems at my place. Then a few weeks ago, I found a big manila envelope that had been shoved under my apartment door. No postage, no return address, nothing. Just my name scribbled across the front. I honestly should have just tossed it. But you know how they say curiosity killed the cat. Yeah, well, I guess I'm just a reckless dumbass because I decided to open it up. What I pulled out made my entire body go numb. Photos. Dozens of them. All candid shots taken outside my apartment building, nearby stores I frequent, even my goddamn workplace. Surveillance pictures, tracking my every move for who knows how long. And in every single one, I could see the unmistakable silhouette lingering in the background somewhere. The grinning hamster had been lurking around me this entire time. And that wasn't even the worst part. Some of the pictures were close-ups, clearly focused on other people. My girlfriend, at the time, my family members, friends. Oh, God. It was like this monster was cataloging out my entire social circle to use as leverage, or pawns, or something even sicker. Scrawled in what looked like dried blood on the back of one photo was a chilling message. Feed the grinning mouth soon, or they all become sacrifices. A neighborhood street corner was circled in red ink. Tomorrow's date underlined. So, yeah, that's where I'm at now. This thing knows who I am, where I live, and everyone else. I'm pretty much at the end of my rope here. This grinning hamster, or whatever the hell you want to call it, clearly ain't messing around anymore. Got photos of me, my family, proof it's been stalking all of us for God knows how long. The really twisted part is the note basically saying if I don't show up and feed this thing soon, it's gonna start snatching people from my life as some kind of messed up sacrifice. My mind has been racing like crazy, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me is like, let's just get the hell out of Dodge and start over somewhere new. Maybe move cross-country and go full witness protection status. But then, I think about all the innocent people this sicko would probably start terrorizing if I don't face it head-on. Could I really live with that on my conscience? I've barely been able to sleep or eat properly this past week, just waiting both sides. Every time I close my eyes, I either see the grinning hamster's maw ready to pounce, or worse, one of my loved ones bound up on their way to being piranha chow. It's straight up psychological torture is what it is. But I know I gotta handle this soon before anyone else gets put in harm's way. The note said to be at this one intersection not far from where I spotted the masked creeps squatting before. Probably an alley or empty lot they've got rigged up to do their nasty business again. Only thing I can think is maybe ambushing it and taking it down from behind when it's distracted. Could try grabbing whatever weapon is nearby to knock it out cold. I don't know. I'm kinda just spitballing ideas here since I have no real experience in this horror movie stuff. I'm honestly terrified out of my mind about what could happen. That thing seemed powerful as hell just from the little glimpses I got. And who knows what other twisted surprises it might have prepped to try and collect another warm body to feed its fishy friends. But I don't have any other choice at this point, you know? It's either go down swinging and pray I can take this abomination out, or risk having to see someone I care about torn apart in front of me. And I could never live with that. So, I guess I'm gonna go pick up something heavy duty that could do some damage if needed. Maybe stop by my buddy's place and let him know what's going down in case I don't make it back. Try and mentally prepare myself the best I can, just in case this is the last anyone ever hears from me. Tell my story. Get the word out there about the grinning hamster and its army of Franken piranhas. Maybe it'll stop this sort of depraved business from ever happening again. 'Cause I really, really hope I'm the last person who has to come face to face with the grinning mouth. Story number 2. I found a neo-Nazi bunker on the dark web. By the Curator. I'm not really sure why I'm writing all this down. I guess part of me hopes that by getting it out there, someone might actually believe me and do something about those sick fucks. Or maybe I just need to process what happened by putting it into words. Whatever the reason, here's my story. It started really innocently. I'd just begun my junior year studying psychology at college. One of the classes I was taking that semester was on the psychology of hate and racism. It was a really fascinating course that dove deep into trying to understand the mindsets and motivations behind prejudiced ideologies like Nazism. For one of my assignments, I had to find some first-hand accounts or primary source materials from real hate groups and analyze the rhetoric and psychology behind it. Most of my classmates just used some mainstream website content from groups like the KKK or neo-Nazis. But I wanted to go a little deeper and find something more raw and unfiltered. That's what led me to the dark web. I'm sure you've heard of it. That wild underbelly of the internet where all sorts of illegal stuff goes down. Hiring hitmen, buying drugs or weapons, sharing explicit and disturbing content. Pretty much anything goes, completely unregulated. I'd never actually accessed it before, but I'd heard about tools like the Tor browser that can get you onto dark websites without being traced. At first, I just thought I'd spend an hour or two poking around some of the less extreme hate sites, looking for useful materials to analyze. But once I started diving in, I got kind of hooked on the thrill of exploring this seedy underground world. There were sectors of the dark web dedicated to every depravity you could imagine, from hardcore porn and torture videos to hacking exploits and identity theft. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I spent way more time on there than I'd intended. Part of me was morbidly curious and wanted to see just how horrible it could get. And despite being Jewish myself, I somehow managed to disconnect enough to view it through an analytical lens for my assignment. Like, these were just people with severely broken psychologies that I was studying. Anyway, after a few weeks of cautiously traversing these sites, I started to notice some recurring references to a mysterious group called the Black Wolves. At first, they seemed like just another hate group. Racist rants about white supremacy, railing against Jewish people and other minorities. Pretty standard vile stuff, but there were hints that they took things way farther than just hateful rhetoric. I came across a couple coded messages bragging about separating the sheep and stealing identities and finances from the raveneers, which I deciphered to mean targeting Jewish people, taking over their lives and assets. There were also some seriously disturbing posts about freeing them from the flesh, which seemed to be a horrific euphemism for murdering people. Part of me knew I should just abandon this line of inquiry and move on. But that same morbid curiosity kept luring me back in. I had to know how far down the rabbit hole this group really went. I spent weeks carefully crawling through dark websites and forums, trying to find any traces of these black wolves to piece together what they were about. Finally, I started finding some coordinates and invitations to some kind of live stream or webcast by the group. There were warnings that it wouldn't be for the faint of heart and that only those proven could access it. My heart was pounding as I followed the instructions, utilizing some tools and exploits I'd picked up from other dark websites to verify my identity, or lack thereof. When I finally got through, what I saw will be forever seared into my brain. It was a live video stream of what looked like an abandoned bunker or bomb shelter. The room was dimly lit. Crude swastikas and other Nazi symbols were spray-painted on the walls. In the center were a group of about 10 people wearing black military-style uniforms with skull masks. They all had assault rifles. And tied up on the floor in the middle of this group was a thin, scruffy-looking older man. He was crying and had duct tape over his mouth, but I could see the terror in his eyes. One of the masked figures was shouting in distorted voice, "Comrades, we have another one of the Raveneers here to face judgment by the Black Wolf Pack. His government identity identifies him as a curator of filth. He was in charge of the so-called Holocaust Museum in New York, dedicated to peddling lies and Jewish propaganda meant to demoralize and subjugate our proud Aryan race." The man lets out a muffled scream from behind the duct tape and starts thrashing in desperation. But it's no use. The group just laughs at him menacingly. We have freed him from the bonds of his false identity and reclaimed his assets. Over $5 million in property, stocks, and other wealth that will be reinvested in the greatness of the new Aryan nation we will build from the ashes. Then another masked figure steps forward, holding a wicked-looking hunting knife. Now it is time for us to release this impostor from the flesh, to free his eternal soul from the blasphemous lies of the Jewish raveneurs. The bound man starts frantically shaking his head, tears streaming down his face as the knife holder approaches him, raising the blade. I watched in incredulous horror as the masked man grabbed a fistful of his victim's hair, jerked his head back, and drew the blade across his exposed throat in one vicious slash. A gurgling scream issues from the man's mouth, now spouting bright red blood. The group cheers, and the stabber raises his knife high, slick with gore. I must have gasped or made some noise, because one of the other figures whipped his head around to face the camera lens and yells, "We see you, lone wolf pup, watching from the darkness. Perhaps you will be the next offering to our righteous pack. The black wolves will cleanse the world of the subhuman filth of the Jewish raveners until our Aryan race inherits the earth." I scrambled to close the stream, pulling off my headphones and curling into a fetal position on my bed. I wanted to vomit, to purge that horrific scene from my eyes and mind. I actually did vomit across my sheets and floor. For 3 straight days, I barely moved from my room, curled up under my covers in abject terror. I was too scared to go to class, or even leave, worried those psychos might somehow track me down. Images of that poor man's anguished face and the gruesome slaughter just kept replaying over and over. Once the initial shock began to wear off, my curiosity returned, but heavily laced with paranoia. I had to find out who those black wolves were and stop them before they killed again. At the same time, I lived in perpetual fear that somehow they'd discover my identity and make good on their threat. I managed to access their live stream again a few days later. It appeared to just be a continuous feed of that same dank bunker. There were no people present, just a looped video on one of the walls showing Nazi imagery and some kind of ranting propaganda speech playing over and over. I kept that grim feed running constantly across all my devices, studying it, taking notes, looking for any kind of clues or leads to trace them. Then about a week later, the unthinkable happened. It was around 4 a.m., and most nights, I just left the Wolves video feed playing while I slept, looking for anything noteworthy first thing in the morning. But a sudden scream of terror jolted me awake in the pitch darkness. I blinked the bleariness from my eyes and stared in shock at the gruesome scene unfolding on my laptop screen. The room was now illuminated by those harsh fluorescent bunker lights, and the assailants were back. But this time it wasn't just one captive victim. There were 4 young people, 3 guys and 1 woman, all appearing to be in their late teens or early 20s. They were bound and gagged, sobbing hysterically as the black-clad, skull-masked wolves surrounded them with rifles raised. Tonight, we offer up these 4 blasphemers who are infiltrating one of our sister orders, posing as initiates in our ranks. One of the distorted voices bellowed. Their subhuman souls will fuel the dark flame as we burn away the decay and weakness of the old world to make way for the dawning Aryan race. I watched in frozen horror as one by one, the helpless captives were wrestled to the floor by groups of soldiers, pulled taut and exposed at gunpoint. With a swift swing of blades, their throats were opened in a welter of gore, their young faces contorted in primal suffering. I pretty much fucking lost it at that point. I'm not proud of it, but I just fucking broke down sobbing and threw up again, watching those poor kids get butchered like animals. I must have passed out from the sheer horror, because the next thing I knew it was morning and my laptop was dead from being on all night. I spent the next couple days feeling like an absolute wreck. Barely ate, couldn't sleep, just haunted by the nightmares of what I'd witnessed. But I also felt this weird obsession to find out who these Black Wolf psychos were and put a stop to their sadistic killing spree. I wasn't about to go to the cops cause I figured they'd just think I was crazy or lock me up for being on the dark web. So I just kinda went back to quietly monitoring their live stream, hoping to catch any clues to trace them. I knew I was in way over my head, but it was like a perverse car crash I couldn't look away from. It stayed quiet for about a week, just that same bunker room with the Nazi imagery looping over and over. I was starting to wonder if maybe they'd gone underground or something. After that last sickening live stream, part of me hoped that was the case and they were done with the killing. But of course, another part of me felt uneasy, like the Black Wolves were just lying in wait for another chance to strike. Then around 2 a.m. one night, the stream suddenly cut to a different scene. I could see them marching a fresh victim down a dark hallway into that same bunker room. This poor guy was a short, scruffy-looking older dude with a big old beard and yarmulke on, so clearly Jewish. He was bawling and pleading in what I'm pretty sure was Hebrew or Yiddish, while the wolves shoved him down to his knees in the center of the room. The same creepy, distorted voice comes over the loudspeaker. Ravener scum, your time has come to pay for your traitorous lies and efforts to defile and corrupt the pure Aryan spirit. The dude just breaks down even harder at that point, sobbing and rocking back and forth. Not gonna lie, I was literally shaking watching this go down. You could just feel the sheer fucking dread and helplessness radiating off the guy. Then one of the wolves stalks up behind him, draws a wicked-looking knife, and just slits the guy's throat wide open. Like his head basically got kicked forward and his neck split apart, spraying blood everywhere. I swear I could almost feel the warmth of it through my screen. The worst part was, the sick bastards just stood there watching this poor elderly Jewish man gurgle out his last gasps and bleed to death on the floor. No mercy, no humanity. Just evil fucking pleasure at snuffing out his life in the most brutal way imaginable. When it was finally over, and the dude laid motionless in a pool of congealed blood, one of the wolves turns to face the camera lens. In that creepy voice filter, he goes, "We are the Night Wolves. the bringers of the Black Dawn to cleanse this world of the Jewish pollution. I think that's when it really hit me, just how twisted and dangerous these maniacs were. This wasn't just some edgelord basement dweller bullshit. They were committed to rampant killing and genocide in the most vile, sadistic ways possible. And who knows how many other cells or chapters were out there among these neo-Nazi fuckheads. Shit just gets even more messed up from here. After witnessing that old Jewish dude get his throat slashed wide open by those black wolf Nazi freaks, I had to take a few days off from even looking at the live stream after that one. My head was just utterly fucked, dealing with all the raw evil I'd seen play out. But I knew I couldn't just let it go. Once you open that Pandora's box of depravity, it kind of consumes you, you know? Like I was now keeper of this messed up secret about a neo-Nazi death cult carrying out genocidal murders. As helpless as I felt, I also weirdly felt responsible to expose them and put an end to the killing spree. So after taking a little breather, I steeled my nerves and dove back into quietly monitoring the Black Wolves live stream. I made sure to record anything of note, studying it for any potential clues or patterns to help locate these lunatics. My dorm room turned into a crazy conspiracy theory web with maps, timelines, and photos plastered everywhere trying to connect the dots. Most nights were just that same bleak, looping footage of the empty bunker room with the Nazi imagery playing on a screen. A fairly uneventful reminder of the horrors I'd witnessed in that space. But every so often, they'd strike again. Without any rhyme or reason, the stream would suddenly switch to the Black Wolves hauling in their latest bound, terrified victim. Just catching glimpses of the poor soul's abject fear as their screams and pleads echoed through the bunker was traumatizing enough. Then the wolves would gather around, raving their anti-Semitic bullshit about purifying the Jewish poison and burning the cancer of Zionist corruption from the world. And inevitably, the knives or rifles would come out, and I'd be forced to watch yet another innocent person have their life brutally robbed by these genocidal fanatics. Have to listen to their screams and gargles as they choked on their own blood. It never got easier, if anything. It was like getting punched in the gut, repeatedly. A few times, I almost hurled my laptop across the room. I was so sickened and enraged. Part of me wondered if I was going insane submitting myself to these snuff films over and over. But I felt utterly compelled to keep watching, keep gathering any intel I could in hopes of taking these monsters down somehow. So that became my solitary existence for like 2 months straight. Drifting through classes in a zombified haze, surviving on Soylent and Adderall to fuel my paranoid obsession with cracking the Black Wolves case. My only human interaction was the petrified faces staring into the cameras each time another Jew was executed in those cursed live streams. Then one particularly sleepless night, something caught my eye amidst the tedium of the bunker room loop. In the background behind the Nazi banners, there's a small metal door set into the concrete wall. Nothing too crazy, but I noticed it was left slightly ajar this time, like a couple-inch gap leading to total darkness behind. My demented mind began deliriously racing. Is that a way out? A maintenance hatch? What if it leads to a bigger underground complex where the wolves are operating out of? I mean, it was obviously just wishful thinking. But after having zero leads for so long, I felt compelled to cling to even the slightest hope of a new clue in this case. So I went full tilt obsessive, spending days meticulously examining and enhancing footage of that slight door crack, looking for any potential hints of what lay beyond that inky blackness. Voices, signs, literally anything to grab onto. After staring at that stupid little door crack for way too many hours, I finally spot something that makes my hair stand on end. It's subtle as hell, just a faint reddish light bleeding through the gap. Could have missed it if I blinked, but that dim crimson glow sparked something in my paranoid mind. What if it was from an exit sign or emergency lighting down a corridor beyond that door? That would mean it can't just be a random maintenance hatch, but part of a larger underground complex or bunker system these Black Wolf psychos are holing up in. I know, it's a hell of a leap to make from a tiny light glimpse, but of the soul-crushing darkness of witnessing so many innocent lives extinguished, I desperately clung to any threads of hope that could lead me to exposing these Nazi scumbags. So for the next few weeks, I intently watched and logged every time that door would be left open, even a crack. Started noticing definite patterns like it would only happen in the early morning hours, usually between 3 to 5 a.m. And each time that faint reddish gleam would flicker briefly before the door was closed again. My crazy conspiracy theory board was getting even more unhinged at this point. I had timelines mapping each door opening, maps speculating on potential underground bunker locations that could fit the limited visual data I was grabbing from the videos. Looking back now, I'm honestly amazed my dorm mates didn't have me hauled away to a psych ward. So yeah, I turned into full tilt private eye mode trying to chase this absurdly vague lead. Even went on some ghetto nighttime recon missions, driving around secluded rural areas near my college with a dossier of topography maps and satellite images from the dark web, looking for any potential match to the bunker's interior room. Probably came across as the biggest creeper, but I remained undeterred, cauterizing my determination in the grim reality that if I failed, more innocent lives could be lost to the Black Wolves' sadistic slaughterhouse. No matter how bleak the odds, I had to keep fighting for a chance to shut those animals' atrocities down. Then one fateful morning, after an all-night stakeout bender, I'm gulping down a hot lecture hall mocha and nearly spit it all over my laptop. Because there it was. The door was left wide open. Now, up until this point, I'd never dared to even fantasize what might lay past those confines. Too terrified I'd somehow get the Black Wolves' attention and make myself a target. But seeing that threshold flung brazenly open, daring me to cross it, I felt a dark possession to finally uncover the truth. With shaking hands, I use every video editing trick and software at my disposal to steadily enhance, brighten, and zoom in on the scene. And at first, nothing. Just blackness. My heart sank into my gut, thinking I'd hit another dead end after coming this far. But then, something began emerging from the utter void, like a photo being developed in a dark room. At first, just murky outlines, metallic grates covering hatches or machine casings. Then illumination strips along the walls and ceiling, like an underground corridor or service tunnel network, until finally, unmistakable details solidified into view that will forever be ingrained in my mind's eye. Sprawling open spaces filled with industrial pipes, electrical switchgear, and heavy blast doors, exactly like something you'd expect for a Cold War-era nuclear fallout bunker complex, along with multiple Black Wolf gunmen patrolling the corridors, clad in body armor, tack gear, the whole nine. This was it. Tangible confirmation I'd struck the motherlode. When the camera panned further down the tunnels, I nearly passed out. Rooms set up as torture chambers and prison cells, lined with archaic medical equipment like rusted gurneys and overhead restraints. And in one of those cells, a gaunt young woman cowering in the corner. I'm not gonna lie, I completely lost my shit at that point. Seeing that poor woman confined and so utterly petrified, it all just became too goddamn real. Yeah, I'd witnessed the Black Wolves brutally executing people on their snuff films, but now there were innocent captives still alive. My mind went to some very dark places, pondering the fresh hell that terrified young woman was enduring at the hands of those neo-Nazi Mongoloids. Was she being starved, beaten, prepped for some sort of twisted ritualistic sacrifice? The possibilities were so endlessly bleak that I actually hurled watching her soundless screams echo through the cell. But after a couple hours, pacing around in mad circles, if I wanted any chance to expose these depraved fucks, and maybe, just maybe, save that poor captive woman and whoever else they had locked up, I had to keep my shit together. I needed to fully document and analyze every fresh detail that came to light. So after wolfing down half a bottle of Xanax and a case of Red Bulls, I dialed my freak-out level back to vigilant professionalism, started rigorously logging timestamps, mapping out the underground complex layout, and looking for any other potential clues or patterns that could unravel this mystery once and for all. Because unlike those torture porn video loops, this was a live feed into the Black Wolves' lair that could yield invaluable intel. Over the next several days, I watched that bunker feed non-stop, taking meticulous notes on the guards' patrol routes, shift changes, any subtle distinctions that could hint at the facility's location or operations. If the Black Wolves wanted to play twisted games, I'd outwit the sickos at their own demented theater. The big break happened to come from, of all things, the trash. See, at one point, I noticed these gunmen periodically shoving waste bags through an exterior door clearly labeled disposal units, which struck me as odd for an underground doomsday shelter. Until it hit me, they must be running a trash incinerator system to avoid arousing suspicion. From there, it was simply a matter of enhancing the camera angles enough to time the exit trajectory of the exhaust plumes being vented outside, which allowed me to triangulate an exit location amidst all these rural topography maps I'd been hoarding. Using some ingenuity, I was able to narrow the Black Wolves' bunker lair all the way down to a decommissioned military depot in the ass end of nowhere, Nevada. Like we're talking 3 hours from any actual town or civilian area. I could barely believe I'd actually cracked their hideout location after agonizing months of online archaeology. Part of me was tempted to just turn over the recon to the authorities at that point. Let professional armed forces handle the Nazi scumbag infestation accordingly. So yeah, after cursing myself as a reckless dumbass, I decided to gear up and make the trip to the Black Wolf Den myself. Alone. Just one scruffy Jewish undergrad against a heavily armed fascist death cult holding up in a clandestine military bunker. Talk about a balanced scale. So, I'm running out of pages to keep logging these events. I'll grab another diary during my travels to Nevada. If you don't hear from me, well, you know what's happened. I'll try my best to document everything that happens. Wish me luck. I'll be in contact with an update soon. This is the Curator. I hope you've enjoyed today's scary stories. Until next time.